When the child is very young, 3 or 4, before he or she can start reading, if the parents can themselves read to the child, that in itself creates the atmosphere or the feeling for reading. So later on, the child would start reading by himself. To maybe get the child interested in the kind of book that he or she likes, instead of forcing the child to read a book that the adult thinks is good for him. After all, I was a great film fan. When I was in my teens and in my 20s, I saw every film that was released. I didn't miss a picture. At the same time, I read hundreds of books. So I don't think it necessarily takes you away. I think, well, let the child decide for himself. That's the best way, because otherwise he might get put off reading if he thinks it's a task or it's I mean, none of us like perhaps studying a particular text, and it took me, I know, because I mean, when my last year at school, we had to do Great Expectations as a text. With the result, afterwards, I never wanted to look at it again. I might have read other books by Dickens, but not. Somehow I avoided Great Expectations or going back to it. The very thought of having to answer questions on it and study it. So I think it's just as soon as the parent realizes what kind of books the boy or girl likes, to sort of put those books in their way. In many cases it does, but sometimes a lot depends on the school too. I know of a school which an expensive school where they were given funds for a library, and they created a very posh library. And I asked them at what time do the children go for library periods, and do they borrow the books and all. And the principal said, no, the books will get spoiled, they'll get dirty, they'll get torn to pieces. We don't let anyone actually take a book off the shelves. They can't come and sort of, it's just for show. So, I mean, that can happen too. So a lot depends also on people who run schools. Writing, you can make a living, but it's not something that a lot of people look upon it, as something where you can write a bestseller overnight and wake up famous and rich the next day, that doesn't happen. It happens very, very rarely, So most writers have to take years to build up a reputation, to get established. So it's a career for someone who is totally committed to writing, and not just something you say, oh, I'll become a writer. But that nowadays, every second person I meet is writing a book. In many cases, it's just an ego trip. So it's not something that you could take right through a lifetime. Okay, yes, give them every month a set amount of, depending on the income of the parents, a set amount of money which is to be spent just on books. And let the child go to the bookshop, or take him to the bookshop, and let the child choose the books himself or herself, and don't interfere with that choice, unless, of course, it's picking up something very salacious, which is obviously not meant. But if you go to a good bookshop, and they have children's sections anyway in the better bookshops. So I think if that's there, and that money to be spent on books only, it would help. And so it has, once they're hooked on reading, they'll always be hooked on reading. Reading is addictive.